Before he became a name whispered with fear across continents. Before cities burned, empires collapsed, and the map of the world was redrawn. He was simply a boy on the cold Mongolian steppe. His name was Temujin. Born into a fragile world of shifting alliances and ancient grudges, Temujin entered life with no promise of greatness. His family would soon be cast out. His father would be poisoned. Hunger, exile, and betrayal would shape his earliest memories. Many children of the steppe lived such lives, and most were forgotten by history. But Temujin was different. In the silence of endless grasslands, beneath the vast and unchanging sky, he learned lessons that would define an age. Loyalty over blood, discipline over tradition, fear as a weapon, and mercy as a calculated choice. Every loss hardened him. Every betrayal taught him how power truly worked. This is not a tale of sudden conquest. It is the slow, relentless rise of a man forged by hardship, step by step, winter by winter, until the world itself seemed too small to resist him. Tonight, we will follow his life as it truly unfolded, not as legend, but as history. We will trace the years, the battles, the alliances, and the decisions that transformed Temujin into Genghis Khan, the ruler who united the tribes of the steppe and built the largest contiguous empire the world has ever known. So settle in, let the noise of the present fade away, and if you find comfort in long-form history told softly, consider subscribing so you can return whenever the past calls again. Now, let us begin beneath the eternal blue sky. Chapter 1. Born on the edge of the steppe, circa 1162. In the middle of the 12th century, the Mongolian steppe lay far beyond the concerns of the great civilizations of the world. While imperial China to the south was ruled by the Jurchen-led Jin dynasty, and the Islamic powers of Central Asia struggled with internal decline, the vast grasslands of Mongolia remained a realm of clans, horses, and ancient customs. This was a land without cities or permanent borders. Power shifted with the seasons, alliances were fragile, and survival depended on mobility, discipline, and violence when necessary. The steppe stretched from Manchuria in the east to the edges of Europe in the west, an ocean of grass ruled by the sky. It was here, around 1162, that a boy named Temujin was born. The exact year of his birth is debated, with estimates ranging from 1155 to 1167, but most historians accept 1162 as the most likely date. His birthplace is equally uncertain, though tradition places it in the upper valley of the Onon River, near the sacred mountain Burkhan Khaldun in the Khenti Mountains of northeastern Mongolia. To the Mongols, this region was more than geography. It was spiritual ground, bound to ancestry and fate. Temujin belonged to the Borjigin clan, one of the two main clans of the Mongol people. His father, Yesuge, was a chieftain of some standing, a hardened warrior who led a formidable band of fighters. According to later Mongol histories, Yesuge was descended from Kabul Khan, an earlier leader of the Borjigin, though some modern historians suggest this lineage may have been exaggerated after Temujin's rise to power. What is certain is that Yesuge was deeply embedded in the violent politics of the steppe. He was the sworn brother of Togril, leader of the powerful Kerate tribe, and a longtime enemy of the Merkit Confederation. It was during one such conflict, around 1160, that Yesugei abducted a young woman named Hoilun, taking her as his wife and igniting a feud that would endure for decades. Hoilun would become Temujin's mother. Strong-willed and resilient, she bore Yesugei 4 sons and a daughter, with Temujin as the eldest among her children. Yet Temujin was not Yesugei's firstborn. 2 older sons from another wife stood ahead of him in the traditional order of succession, leaving his future uncertain from the very beginning. From infancy, Temujin was shaped by the rhythms of nomadic life. He learned to ride almost before he could walk, to draw a bow while in motion, and to hunt for survival rather than sport. Around him, he absorbed the unspoken laws of the steppe, where loyalty was fragile, hospitality sacred, and strength the final arbiter of all things. At his birth, there was nothing to suggest that this child would one day alter the course of world history. Yet beneath the endless blue sky, on the far edge of the known world, a life had begun, quietly, anonymously, already bound to the fate of the steppe itself. Chapter 2. Father's Death and a Family Cast Out, circa 1171 to 1177. Around the year 1171, when Temujin was likely 9 years old, his childhood came to an abrupt and irreversible end. His father, Yesugei, was returning from the Ongirat lands after arranging Temujin's betrothal to a young girl named Borta. During the journey home, Yesugei encountered a group of Tartars, longtime enemies of the Mongols. Rather than attack, the Tartars invited him to share a meal. On the steppe, hospitality was sacred. To refuse would have been an insult, and Yesugei accepted. The poison they gave him worked slowly. It allowed Yesugei time to realize what had been done and to send word for his son to be brought home from the Ongirat. By the time Temujin returned, his father was dying. Soon after, Yesugei succumbed to the poison, leaving behind a family suddenly stripped of protection, authority, and allies. In the politics of the Mongolian steppe, death was not merely personal, it was political. Hoilun attempted to assume leadership on behalf of her sons, but her position was fragile. Yesugei's followers began to abandon the family one by one, taking their livestock and weapons with them. Without a strong adult male leader, loyalty evaporated quickly. The Taichud, rivals of the Borjigin clan, reasserted control, and Hoilun's household was cast out. The fall was swift. Once surrounded by warriors and herds, the family was reduced to destitution. Hoilun and her children were left alone on the steppe, forced to survive without protection. They hunted small animals, trapped fish in frozen streams, and gathered roots and wild plants. Hunger became a constant presence, shaping each day and each decision. Temujin learned quickly. He proved an able hunter, particularly skilled with the bow, and often provided food for the family alongside his brother, Khazar. Yet scarcity bred tension. His elder half-brothers, Begta and Belgute, began to claim authority over the younger children and assert control over the food they caught. The conflict came to a head when Begta took a fish Temujin and Khazar had hunted and cooked it for himself. On the steppe, such acts were more than theft. They were declarations of dominance. Temujin responded with violence. While Belgute was away, Temujin and Khazar ambushed Begta and killed him with arrows. It was not a calculated political act, but a desperate assertion of survival in a world where weakness invited extinction. Hoilun was furious. She warned her sons that killing their own kin would bring disaster. Her fears were well-founded. Begta's death gave the Taichud the pretext they needed to move against Temujin. The boy had crossed a line. From this moment onward, Temujin was no longer merely struggling to survive. He had become a marked figure on the steppe, drawn into a cycle of violence that would define the rest of his life. Chapter 3: Chains, Escape, and First Loyalty, circa 1177 to 1180. By the late 1170s, the consequences of Temujin's actions had begun to close in around him. The killing of Begta had not been forgotten. Among the Mongol tribes, bloodshed within a family was both taboo and politically dangerous. For the Taichud, rivals of the Borjigin clan and now dominant in the region, Temujin's presence represented unfinished business. Sometime around 1177, Temujin was captured. The Taichud did not simply imprison him, they sought to humiliate him publicly. A heavy wooden collar, known as a kang, was locked around his neck, restricting his movement and marking him as a criminal. He was forced to move from camp to camp, displayed as a warning to others who might challenge established authority. In the silence of captivity, Temujin watched and waited. He learned the rhythms of his captors, their routines, their moments of carelessness, the quiet arrogance that power can bring. He said little. He conserved strength. Even in chains, he remained alert to opportunity. One night, during a moment of distraction, Temujin struck. He knocked down his guard and fled into the darkness, still wearing the wooden collar. For days, he hid along riverbanks and in tall reeds, surviving on exhaustion and resolve. Eventually, he was discovered by a member of the Taichud household. Instead of betraying him, the man made a choice. Risking severe punishment, he hid Temujin, removed the collar, and helped him escape. This act of mercy, unrewarded and unforced, left a deep impression. It showed Temujin that loyalty could exist outside bloodlines and clans, freely given rather than inherited. When Temujin returned to his family, their situation remained desperate. They possessed only 9 horses, their most valuable resource. Soon after, the Taichud raided the camp and stole 8 of them, leaving Temujin with a single horse and no protection. He chose to pursue. During the chase, Temujin encountered a young man named Boorchu. Without asking for payment or status, Boorchu joined him. Together, they tracked the raiders, recovered the stolen horses, and escaped under cover of night. During the retreat, Boorchu wounded the Taichud leader, allowing both men to flee. From that moment onward, Boorchu pledged himself to Temujin. This was not an alliance of convenience. It was a bond forged through shared danger and mutual trust. Boorchu would later become one of Temujin's most loyal companions, remaining at his side for decades. By 1180, Temujin was no longer alone. He had learned how captivity could break the careless, how mercy could create loyalty, and how shared risk could bind men more tightly than kinship. These lessons, learned quietly on the margins of the steppe, would soon become the foundation of a new kind of leadership. The chains had failed to hold him, and in their place, loyalty had begun to form. Chapter 4: Marriage, Betrayal, and the Return of War, circa 1180 to 1186. By the early 1180s, Temujin had survived childhood, captivity, and exile. Yet survival alone was not enough. On the Mongolian steppe, a man without family ties and political alliances remained vulnerable, no matter how skilled or determined he might be. It was time to claim what had been promised. Around 1180, Temujin returned to the lands of the Ongirat tribe to marry Borta, the girl to whom he had been betrothed years earlier by his father Yesuge. At the time of the original agreement, Temujin had been left behind with Borta's family as part of the bride price, a sign of his family's declining status. Now he returned not as a dependent child, but as a young man seeking to establish his own household. The marriage was both personal and political. Borta became Temujin's chief wife, and with her came renewed legitimacy. The couple established a small camp, modest in size but rich in promise. For the first time since his father's death, Temujin experienced a fragile sense of stability, companionship, continuity, and a future that extended beyond mere survival. That stability was shattered abruptly. Not long after the marriage, a Merkit raiding party descended upon Temujin's camp in the night. The attack was swift and overwhelming. Temujin and his followers fled into the darkness, but Borta was captured and carried away. The raid was an act of revenge, rooted in the past. Yesuge's abduction of Hoyalun, decades earlier, had never been forgotten. Temujin could not rescue her alone. In desperation, he turned to alliances. First, he sought out Togril, Khan of the Kerate tribe and sworn brother of his late father. Appealing to old bonds and shared history, Temujin asked for protection and assistance. Togril accepted him as a son and agreed to help. Temujin also renewed contact with Jamukha, his childhood companion, who at this time was still his ally. Together, their combined forces launched a campaign against the Merkit, marking Temujin's return to organized warfare, not as a fugitive, but as a leader within a coalition. The campaign succeeded. The Merkit camps were attacked and scattered, and Borta was recovered. Yet her return carried uncertainty. During her captivity, she had been given to a Merkit leader, and soon after her rescue, she gave birth to a son. Temujin named the child Jochi, meaning guest. Despite doubts whispered among others, Temujin publicly accepted Jochi as his own. In doing so, he made a decision that reflected a principle he would later apply on a far greater scale. Loyalty and acknowledgement mattered more than blood alone. Between 1181 and 1186, Borta bore additional children, anchoring Temujin's household and strengthening his position among the Mongols. Yet beneath the surface, alliances were already beginning to strain. Jamukha and Temujin differed fundamentally in their visions of leadership, one rooted in aristocratic tradition, the other in merit and loyalty. The rescue of Borta marked more than a personal victory. It marked Temujin's re-entry into the violent politics of the steppe and signaled his emergence as a figure capable of shaping events, rather than merely enduring them. The return of war had begun, and it would not end quietly. Chapter 5. Brothers turned enemies. Temujin versus Jamukha, 1186 to 1201. For a time, Temujin and Jamukha rode together. They had known each other since childhood, sharing meals, stories, and the quiet promises boys make beneath the open sky. In Mongol tradition, they had once sworn brotherhood, a bond meant to be as strong as blood itself. Yet as the years passed, it became clear that they were walking toward very different futures. Jamukha was born into the Mongol aristocracy. He believed deeply in tradition, hierarchy, and noble lineage. To him, leadership belonged to those of the proper bloodlines, upheld by ancient customs and inherited authority. Temujin, shaped by exile and hardship, believed something else entirely. He believed loyalty was earned. By 1186, the differences could no longer be ignored. Temujin was attracting followers not through birthright, but by rewarding merit, protecting the weak, and promoting men based on ability rather than ancestry. To many common herders and dispossessed clansmen, this was revolutionary. To Jamukha, it was dangerous. That year, Jamukha was chosen as leader by the Mongol nobles, elevating him as the rightful aristocratic ruler. Temujin, by contrast, was proclaimed leader by his own followers, men who had chosen him freely. Two Khans now stood on the steppe, each claiming legitimacy, each embodying a different vision of order. Conflict was inevitable. The first open war between them ended in disaster for Temujin. Jamukha's forces, larger and supported by elite clans, defeated Temujin's followers. Jamukha ordered brutal reprisals against Temujin's supporters, executing young men and terrorizing families. It was a message meant to restore traditional authority through fear. Temujin fled. For years, he lived in obscurity, moving across the steppe, gathering strength quietly. Many who followed him were poor, abandoned, or drawn from minor clans, men who had little to lose and much to gain. Temujin offered them protection, shared spoils, and something rare on the steppe: justice that applied to all. Slowly, his power grew. During the 1190s, alliances shifted repeatedly. Jamukha aligned himself with powerful tribes, including the Nayman, while Temujin strengthened his ties with Togrul, the Khwarezmian Khan, who had once been his father's sworn brother. Yet even this alliance was unstable, eroded by jealousy and political intrigue. Temujin suffered further setbacks. Togrul eventually turned against him, driven by fear of Temujin's rising influence. Once again, Temujin was forced into retreat. Once again, he survived. Each defeat hardened him. He refined his methods, reorganized his followers, and promoted commanders like Jebe and Subadeh, men of humble origins whose loyalty was unquestioned. Unlike Jamukha, Temujin did not rule through terror. He ruled through shared risk and shared reward. By 1201, Jamukha was formally elected as Gur Khan by a coalition of tribes, solidifying his position as Temujin's greatest rival. The steppe was divided not merely by armies, but by ideology. One side clung to the old aristocratic order. The other followed a man who promised opportunity beyond birth. The war between Temujin and Jamukha was no longer personal. It had become a struggle for the future of the Mongol world itself. As the steppe braced for greater violence, one truth was becoming clear. Only one of these brothers could survive. And when the conflict finally ended, it would not be tradition that prevailed, but transformation. Chapter 6: Fire, Snow, and Blood. The Unification Wars, 1201 to 1204. At the dawn of the 13th century, the Mongolian steppe stood on the edge of transformation. By 1201, the long rivalry between Temujin and Jamukha had drawn nearly every major tribe into its orbit. The steppe was no longer a patchwork of small feuds. It had become a battlefield defined by alliances, betrayals, and competing visions of power. Jamukha, now elected leader by a coalition of tribes, represented the old aristocratic order. Around him gathered powerful groups, such as the Nayman, Merkits, and remnants of rival Mongol clans. Temujin, in contrast, led a coalition built from loyalty rather than lineage, carried followers, lesser Mongol clans, and warriors who had risen through merit alone. War became unavoidable. The early campaigns were brutal and uncertain. Battles were not fought on fixed fronts, but across wide expanses of grassland, rivers, and mountain passes. Victory depended on speed, discipline, and the ability to endure extreme conditions. One such confrontation would become legendary. During a campaign fought in the depths of winter, Temujin's forces clashed with their enemies amid a snowstorm. Visibility vanished. Men and horses alike struggled to breathe. In the chaos, Temujin was struck by an arrow, piercing his neck. Blood flowed freely, and for a moment, the future of his cause hung in the balance. It was Gelme, one of Temujin's most loyal companions, who saved him. Gelme dismounted, sucked the blood from Temujin's wound to keep him alive, and rode naked through enemy lines to steal milk and water for his wounded leader. It was an act of extraordinary devotion, performed without hesitation. Temujin survived, not because of fortune, but because loyalty had become his greatest shield. As the wars continued, new figures emerged. One of them was Jebe, a skilled archer from a rival tribe. During battle, Jebe had shot the arrow that wounded Temujin's horse. When captured, he did not deny his action. Instead, he spoke openly, acknowledging his skill and offering his service. Rather than executing him, Temujin spared his life and gave him a new name, Jebe, meaning arrow. It was a defining moment. In sparing enemies who demonstrated ability and loyalty, Temujin sent a clear message. The past mattered less than usefulness to the future. Jebe would go on to become one of the greatest generals of the Mongol age. Between 1202 and 1203, Temujin systematically dismantled his rivals. The Merkits were defeated and scattered. Jamukha's supporters dwindled as entire clans defected to Temujin's banner. Even Togril, once Temujin's protector, turned against him, only to be defeated and killed while fleeing among the Nayman. The final challenge came from the Nayman, the most powerful tribal confederation remaining on the steppe. In 1204, Temujin faced them in a decisive confrontation. The Nayman relied on numbers and traditional formations. Temujin relied on discipline, deception, and psychological warfare. His forces lit hundreds of fires across the hills at night, creating the illusion of a vastly larger army. When battle came, the Nayman lines collapsed. Their defeat marked the end of organized resistance. Jamukha fled, once more a fugitive. The great tribal coalitions that had dominated the steppe for generations were broken. One by one, their people were absorbed, reorganized, and bound by new rules. By the end of 1204, Temujin stood unrivaled. The wars of fire, snow, and blood had achieved what centuries of tradition had failed to do. The steppe was no longer divided by birth and ancient grudges. It was being unified under a single leader, one forged by hardship, sustained by loyalty, and shaped by relentless purpose. The age of clans was ending, and the age of an empire was about to begin. Chapter 7: Jamukha's End and the Birth of Genghis Khan, 1204 to 1206. After the defeat of the Nayman in 1204, the Mongolian steppe fell into an unfamiliar silence. For the first time in generations, no great rival remained to challenge Temujin openly. The ancient tribal coalitions had been shattered, their leaders killed, absorbed, or scattered. Yet one figure still lingered at the edges of the steppe's memory: Jamukha. Once Temujin's sworn brother, Jamukha now wandered as a fugitive. The aristocratic world he had defended no longer existed. Those who still followed him did so out of fear or desperation, not loyalty. In time, even that fragile support collapsed. Jamukha was betrayed by his own men. Seeking favor with the rising power, they captured him and delivered him to Temujin, hoping to be rewarded. Instead, they were executed. Temujin despised betrayal more than resistance. To him, loyalty, even to an enemy, was a virtue that could not be compromised. Jamukha was brought before his former brother. The meeting was quiet. There was no triumph, no celebration. According to the secret history of the Mongols, Jamukha spoke calmly, acknowledging that the steppe could not hold two leaders. He asked for an honorable death, one that spilled no blood, in keeping with noble tradition. Temujin granted the request. Jamukha was executed without bloodshed. His life ended gently, his body treated with respect. It was a tragic conclusion to a shared childhood and a shared dream that had diverged too far to coexist. With Jamukha's death, the old aristocratic order of the Mongols finally passed into history. What remained was something new. In 1206, leaders from across the steppe gathered at a great Kurultai, a traditional assembly held near the Onon River. Representatives of the Mongol tribes, once enemies, now unified, came together to recognize a single authority. Temujin was proclaimed supreme ruler of all Mongols. It was here that he received a new title: Genghis Khan. The exact meaning of the name is debated, but it is often understood as universal ruler or oceanic Khan, a leader whose authority extended in all directions, without boundary. This moment did not mark the beginning of his power. That had been earned through years of hardship, exile, and war. Instead, it marked its formal recognition. For the first time, the Mongols were united under a single law, a single command structure, and a single vision. Temujin, the orphan of the steppe, no longer existed. In his place stood Genghis Khan, ruler of a people forged by fire, bound by loyalty, and poised to move beyond the grasslands into the wider world. The steppe had given birth to an empire, and its echoes were only beginning to travel. Chapter 8. Building an Empire Before Conquering One, 1206 to 1209. With his authority formally recognized in 1206, Genghis Khan did not immediately turn outward. Before expanding beyond the steppe, he focused on something far more difficult: creating order among a people long divided by blood feuds and shifting loyalties. An empire, he understood, could not be built on chaos. One of his first priorities was the reorganization of the Mongol army. Traditional tribal groupings were dismantled and replaced with a decimal system that cut across clan lines. Soldiers were organized into units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000. Commanders were appointed not for noble birth, but for proven ability and loyalty. In doing so, Genghis Khan weakened old rivalries and ensured that no single tribe could dominate the others. This system transformed the Mongols from a collection of warriors into a disciplined, unified force. Alongside military reform came law. Genghis Khan introduced a legal code known as the Yasa. Though never written down in a single text, the Yasa governed nearly every aspect of life: military discipline, theft, adultery, loyalty, and the treatment of envoys. Its central purpose was order. Punishments were severe, but they were applied equally, regardless of status. For a society accustomed to arbitrary power, this consistency was revolutionary. To protect himself and enforce authority, Genghis Khan created an elite personal guard known as the Keshig. Drawn from the sons of trusted families, the Keshig served not only as bodyguards, but also as administrators and future commanders. Service in the Keshig was both an honor and a test of loyalty, binding the ruling family directly to the broader Mongol elite. Yet Genghis Khan's vision extended beyond force and law. He promoted religious tolerance at a time when faith often divided societies. The Mongol world included shamans, Buddhists, Nestorian Christians, and Muslims, and Genghis Khan allowed all to worship freely, so long as they did not challenge his authority. This policy was not born of idealism, but of pragmatism. A ruler who allowed belief to flourish could govern diverse peoples without constant rebellion. He also restructured the distribution of spoils, ensuring that rewards were shared among followers rather than hoarded by the elite. This reinforced loyalty and reduced internal conflict. Men fought not just for conquest, but for a system that recognized their contribution. Between 1206 and 1209, these reforms quietly reshaped Mongol society. Camps became more orderly, chains of command were clarified. Justice, though harsh, became predictable. For the first time, the Mongols were governed not solely by tradition, but by a centralized authority with a coherent vision. Genghis Khan had built the foundations of empire without crossing a single foreign border. Only after securing unity, discipline, and loyalty at home did he begin to look outward, toward the settled kingdoms beyond the steppe. The world beyond Mongolia was about to feel the consequences of decisions made in silence. Chapter 9. The First Wars with China, Xia and Jin, 1209 to 1215. By 1209, the Mongol world had been unified. The steppe was no longer a place of rival clans, but a single political force under Genghis Khan. Only then did he turn his attention beyond Mongolia's borders. To the south lay China, divided among powerful states that had long viewed the nomads as a threat to be contained rather than a force to be respected. The first target was the western Xia, ruled by the Tangut people. Though smaller than other Chinese dynasties, Western Xia controlled vital trade routes between China and Central Asia. Its cities were fortified, its rulers confident that walls and deserts would protect them from mounted warriors of the steppe. In 1209, Genghis Khan launched his first foreign campaign. The Mongols were inexperienced in siege warfare. They had little knowledge of city walls, towers, and defensive engines. Instead of retreating, Genghis Khan adapted. He surrounded cities, cut supply lines, and used speed and terror as psychological weapons. Raiding parties devastated the countryside, forcing defenders to watch as their resources disappeared. By 1210, Western Xia was compelled to submit. Its ruler acknowledged Mongol supremacy, agreed to pay tribute, and provided military support. Genghis Khan withdrew, not defeated, but having learned a crucial lesson. Cities could fall. The far greater challenge lay farther east, in the territory of the Jin dynasty. Ruled by the Jurchen, the Jin controlled northern China and presided over a population numbering in the tens of millions. They possessed standing armies, fortified capitals, and long experience defending against nomadic incursions. In 1211, Genghis Khan invaded Jin territory. Rather than assaulting the strongest defenses directly, the Mongols exploited mobility and deception. They crossed mountain passes thought impassable, divided their forces, and struck where resistance was weakest. Jin armies, accustomed to static defense, struggled to respond to an enemy that refused to fight on predictable terms. The Mongols pillaged the countryside, not only for plunder, but to undermine the Jin war effort. Crops were destroyed, towns abandoned, and refugees flooded into fortified cities, straining resources from within. Siege warfare became systematic. Captured engineers were forced to construct machines capable of breaking walls, tools the Mongols quickly mastered. By 1214, the Jin capital at Zhongdu, near modern-day Beijing, stood under threat. The Jin court attempted to negotiate. They offered tribute, hostages, and a marriage alliance, hoping to buy peace. Genghis Khan accepted the terms and withdrew, but the peace was fragile. When the Jin emperor moved the capital south, abandoning Zhongdu, the act was seen as betrayal. The Mongols returned. In 1215, Zhongdu fell. The city was looted and burned, its fall sending shockwaves throughout northern China. Though Genghis Khan did not yet control the entire Jin realm, the psychological balance of power had shifted irreversibly. For the first time, a nomadic empire had breached the heart of northern China. These early wars were not merely acts of destruction, they were experiments, testing strategy, logistics, and command across unfamiliar terrain. Genghis Khan observed carefully, refining his approach to governance and conquest alike. He rewarded cooperation, punished resistance, and incorporated skilled individuals into his expanding system. Between 1209 and 1215, the Mongols transformed themselves from steppe warriors into an imperial army, capable of confronting the world's most sophisticated states. China had not yet fallen, but the illusion of its invulnerability had. Beyond the walls of its cities, beneath the vast sky that had shaped Genghis Khan from birth, a new kind of war was unfolding. Slow, methodical, and unstoppable. And it was only the beginning. Chapter 10. The West Explodes. The Khwarezmian Catastrophe, 1218 to 1221. In the year 1218, Genghis Khan did not seek war with the Islamic world. His empire now stretched from the forests of Siberia to the edges of northern China. To the west lay the Khwarezmian Empire, a wealthy and powerful state that controlled the trade routes of Central Asia, from the Aral Sea to Persia. Its cities, Otrar, Bukhara, and Samarkand, were centers of commerce, learning, and Islamic culture. Genghis Khan sent merchants. A caravan of Mongol traders arrived at Otrar, seeking permission to trade. Instead, they were accused of espionage by the city's governor, Inalchuk, who had them arrested and executed. When Genghis Khan sent envoys demanding justice, Shah Muhammad II of Khwarezm ordered the envoys killed or humiliated. In the Mongol world, this was unforgivable. Envoys were sacred. To harm them was to invite annihilation. War followed, not immediately, but deliberately. In 1219, Genghis Khan launched one of the most carefully planned campaigns in military history. Rather than advance as a single force, he divided his army into multiple columns, sending them across deserts, mountains, and river valleys, thought impossible for large armies to cross. The Khwarezmian leadership expected invasion from the east. The Mongols came from everywhere. Otrar was besieged and eventually destroyed, its governor executed after months of resistance. Meanwhile, Mongol armies appeared suddenly at the gates of Bukhara, having crossed the Kizilkum Desert, a route the defenders believed impassable. Bukhara fell quickly. According to chroniclers, Genghis Khan addressed the city's population from the pulpit of its great mosque, declaring himself a punishment sent by heaven. Whether legend or propaganda, the message was clear. Resistance would be met with total destruction. From Bukhara, the Mongols moved on Samarkand, the jewel of Central Asia. The city's massive walls and garrison gave Shah Muhammad confidence. Yet the defense collapsed within days. Mongol engineers, many captured during earlier campaigns, constructed siege machines. False retreats drew defenders into the open. Once the walls were breached, the city fell, and its wealth was absorbed into the Mongol system. As his empire disintegrated, Shah Muhammad fled. Rather than defend his cities, he moved constantly, east, then west, seeking refuge while his authority evaporated. Genghis Khan dispatched generals Jebe and Subedeh to pursue him across thousands of kilometers. They hunted relentlessly, crossing mountains and rivers, until the Shah died in 1220 or early 1221, isolated on an island in the Caspian Sea. The Khwarezmian Empire ceased to exist. Between 1219 and 1221, Mongol armies swept through Central Asia and Persia. Cities that surrendered were spared. Those that resisted were annihilated. The destruction was systematic, designed to ensure no power could rise again in the region. Yet beneath the devastation lay method. The Mongols gathered intelligence, recruited administrators, spared artisans, and integrated conquered territories into their growing empire. This was not chaos. It was calculated terror paired with ruthless efficiency. By 1221, the Islamic world had been shattered. Trade routes were redrawn. Entire regions were depopulated. The shockwaves reached Baghdad, Damascus, and beyond, carried by survivors and rumor alike. For Genghis Khan, this campaign marked the fulfillment of his transformation. No longer a steppe warlord, he had become a world conqueror, commanding armies across continents, reshaping civilizations through speed, discipline, and fear. The West had exploded under the weight of his response, and though the Mongol armies would soon turn back toward the steppe, the world they left behind would never recover its former shape. History had crossed a threshold, and there was no return. Chapter 11. From Persia to the Edge of Europe, 1221 to 1224. By 1221, the Khwarezmian Empire lay in ruins, but the Mongol advance did not end with its collapse. Instead, it fractured into multiple currents, flowing outward in different directions, each commanded by men shaped by Genghis Khan's methods and trust. In Persia, devastation continued under the command of Tolui, Genghis Khan's youngest son. Tasked with suppressing resistance in Khorasan, Tolui led campaigns against cities such as Nishapur, Merv, and Herat. These were not battles between armies, but punishments imposed upon urban centers that resisted Mongol authority. The destruction was immense. Contemporary chroniclers describe cities emptied of life, their populations erased to prevent future rebellion. Artisans and skilled workers were spared and relocated. The rest were not. Khorasan, once a center of Persian culture and learning, was left broken. The message was unmistakable. Defiance would not be tolerated, even after conquest. While Tolui enforced order in the south, 2 Mongol generals rode westward into the unknown. Jebe and Subedai, veterans of the Khwarezmian campaign, were dispatched on what began as a pursuit and evolved into a reconnaissance mission of unprecedented scale. With a relatively small force, they crossed the Caucasus Mountains, entering regions that had never before faced a Mongol army. In Georgia, the Mongols clashed with Christian forces, unprepared for their tactics. Feigned retreats, rapid flanking maneuvers, and disciplined coordination shattered traditional defenses. Victory followed quickly, and the Mongols pressed on. They moved north into the lands of the Alans and the Cumans, manipulating rivalries between steppe peoples to defeat them one by one. When the Cumans fled westward, they carried stories of terror with them, warnings that soon reached the courts of Kievan Rus. In 1223, a coalition of Rus princes joined forces with the Cumans to confront the advancing Mongols. They met near the Kalka River in what would become the first direct clash between Mongol forces and the armies of Eastern Europe. The battle was brief and devastating. Jebe and Subedai employed their familiar strategy, feigning retreat over several days. When the Rus forces finally attacked, stretched thin and disorganized, the Mongols turned and struck. The coalition collapsed. Princes were captured and executed, their authority crushed beneath Mongol power. Yet the Mongols did not stay. After the victory at the Kalka River, Jebe and Subedai withdrew eastward, completing a vast circuit across Central Asia, the Caucasus, and the fringes of Europe. Their mission was not conquest, but knowledge. They had mapped routes, tested enemies, and gathered intelligence that would later guide far greater invasions. By 1224, Mongol armies began returning to the steppe. Behind them lay a trail of shattered cities, broken coalitions, and stunned civilizations. From Persia to the edge of Europe, the world had glimpsed a force unlike any it had known. Fast, disciplined, and relentless. For Genghis Khan, these years marked the outer reach of his first global vision. His empire now touched multiple civilizations, not as rumor, but as lived reality. The storm had passed, for now, but its memory lingered across continents, carried by survivors who understood one terrible truth. The Mongols had not reached their limits. They had only tested them. Chapter 12. The Last Campaign and the Death of a Conqueror, 1225 to 1227. In 1225, after years away from the Mongolian steppe, Genghis Khan returned home. He was no longer the restless war leader of his youth. He was in his early 60s, an advanced age by the standards of the steppe, and carried the weight of decades of campaigns across continents. Yet peace did not greet him. One final matter remained unresolved. To the southwest lay the Western Xia, the Tangut kingdom that had once submitted to Mongol rule in 1209. During the Khwarezmian campaign, the Tangut had refused to provide troops and support. To Genghis Khan, this was not mere disobedience. It was betrayal. In 1226, he launched his final campaign. The Mongol armies advanced methodically, devastating Tangut cities and farmland. Fortresses fell one by one. Unlike earlier campaigns aimed at expansion, this war carried a sense of finality. Genghis Khan ordered the systematic destruction of Western Xia, determined that it would never rise again as a political entity. During this campaign, Genghis Khan was injured. The exact nature of the injury remains uncertain. Some sources claim he fell from his horse during a hunt, Others suggest he was wounded in battle or suffered from illness brought on by age and exhaustion. Mongol records were deliberately vague, preserving the image of an invincible ruler, even in decline. What is clear is that his health deteriorated rapidly. By 1227, as Western Xia collapsed, Genghis Khan knew the end was near. He issued final orders to his commanders and reaffirmed plans for succession, ensuring the continuity of the empire he had built. His death was kept secret to maintain morale and prevent unrest. Sometime in late 1227, Genghis Khan died. The cause remains unknown. In keeping with Mongol tradition, his burial was conducted in absolute secrecy. The location of his tomb was deliberately concealed. According to legend, those involved in the burial were killed to preserve the secret, and a river was diverted to cover the grave. Whether these stories are true or symbolic, the result is the same. The tomb of Genghis Khan has never been found. He left behind no palace, no capital city, and no monument bearing his name. Instead, he left an empire that stretched from the Pacific to the Caspian Sea, and a system of rule that would shape Eurasia for generations. The man who began life as a forgotten child on the edge of the steppe vanished into silence. Yet his influence did not. As the Mongolian steppe returned to quiet beneath the endless blue sky, the world beyond it was permanently altered. Trade routes shifted. Empires recalculated their borders. Entire civilizations remembered his name with fear, awe, or reluctant admiration. Genghis Khan was gone, but the empire he created was only beginning to move. When Genghis Khan died in 1227, his empire did not collapse. It expanded. Under his chosen successor, Ögedei Khan, the Mongol armies pushed farther west into Europe and deeper into the Middle East. Decades later, under Kublai Khan, his grandson, Mongol rule would reach its administrative peak, governing China as the Yuan dynasty and connecting east and west through trade, diplomacy, and shared knowledge. Yet expansion alone does not define a legacy. The empire forged beneath the eternal blue sky reshaped the world in quieter ways. Trade routes reopened across Eurasia. Ideas, technologies, and cultures traveled farther and faster than ever before. At the same time, entire cities vanished, populations were erased, and fear became a tool of governance. So how should history remember Genghis Khan? As a unifier who ended centuries of tribal warfare? As a visionary who built systems of law, merit, and religious tolerance? Or as a conqueror whose campaigns left devastation on an unprecedented scale? The answer depends on where one stands and on which stories survived. What remains undeniable is this: from a forgotten child on the edge of the steppe, a force emerged that altered the course of human history. Not through destiny or divine right, but through discipline, loyalty, and an unyielding understanding of power. The grasslands where Temujin once rode have long since fallen silent, but the echoes of his decisions still move through our world. If you find meaning in these quiet journeys into the past, consider subscribing so you can return whenever history calls again, softly beneath the eternal blue sky. For now, let the story rest and let the night take over.